Dennis Smith Jr. had the kind of start that makes a team think it just found a future lead guard. His rookie season was not perfect, but it had real energy. He put up around 15 points per game, recorded a triple-double by December, and played with the exact qualities the NBA loves in a young guard speed burst, and the feeling that he could create something out of nothing. At that point, the question was not whether Smith belonged. The question was how high he was going to climb. Then the climb slowed almost immediately. The scoring dipped. The efficiency, which was never that clean to begin with, became a bigger problem. The three-point shot stayed shaky at times, dropping to ugly levels, and his role slowly moved from starter to backup guard. What makes this case sting is that Smith never lacked athleticism. What he lacked was the next layer. The NBA once saw an explosive young guard. A few years later, it saw a rotation player just trying to hold on to a place in the league. Lance Stephenson is the kind of player who had exactly one season that made people believe something much bigger was coming. In 2014, with Indiana, he felt like he was everywhere. Nearly 14 points over 7 rebounds, almost 5 assists per game, more than 35 minutes a night, and he even led the NBA in triple-doubles that season. What made that year stand out was not just the stat line. It was the feeling that Lance had finally put everything together at once. The energy, the creativity, the rebounding, the passing, and the chaos under control. For a moment, he looked like a real multi-tool wing. But that year turned out not to be a launch point. It was the peak. The very next season, the scoring fell hard and the efficiency fell with it. The field goal percentage dropped, the three-point shot at times became brutal, and his overall game never really got back near that 2014 version again. Once he left Indiana, the career started drifting from team to team. Charlotte, the Clippers, Memphis, New Orleans, and even stops overseas. With Stephenson, the issue was not that he never touched a bigger version of himself. The issue was that he only touched it once. John Collins' contracts usually tell you what a team believes a player is about to become, not just what he already is. And when John Collins got paid in Atlanta, the message was obvious: this was supposed to be a power forward on the way to a bigger tier. Before that, Collins had given people real reasons to believe it. He had a season above 21 points and 10 rebounds, shot over 58% from the field, and even touched 40% from three. For a young big, that is the kind of profile that makes people think a true modern forward is about to arrive. But the next part never fully stabilized. The three-point shot slipped. The role did not expand much further. The passing and defensive impact never grew enough to completely change his value. Collins still had strong nights. He still put up decent production, but the development curve stopped rising the way the contract suggested it would. He did not collapse. He just stopped too early. And in the NBA, stopping too early is often how a player who once looked like the future turns into someone who is simply useful in the present. Kyle Kuzma is an interesting case because on the surface, he looks like someone who did improve. The scoring went up. The offensive role got bigger. He had seasons above 21, then above 22 points per game, which is enough to make people think a real breakout finally arrived. From a late first-round pick who made noise immediately as a rookie with around 16 points a night and promising three-point shooting, Kuzma followed the path a lot of scorers dream about: more touches, more chances, more spotlight. But when you look closer, that growth does not fully feel like a jump in quality. It feels more like an increase in volume. The three-point shooting still hovered in the low 30s. The field goal percentage never rose into truly dangerous territory either. The rebounding and passing ticked up, but never enough to turn him into a complete forward. Even in the playoffs, especially during the Lakers' 2020 title run, Kuzma's role and production clearly shrank. That is why his story is not about being bad. It is about never becoming the bigger version people once thought they were watching for him in real time. Justise Winslow looked like exactly the kind of player the modern NBA claims it wants. A wing who could defend multiple spots, rebound, handle a little pass, a little, and physically survive at both ends. When Miami took him 10th overall in 2015, the idea was almost too clean. This could be a versatile piece who slowly grows into something bigger. The problem is that the blueprint never fully became the finished product. Winslow had nights that reminded people why the belief existed. There were scoring bursts, well-rounded stat lines, and moments where it felt like one more step would bring the whole thing together. That step never came. The career scoring stayed modest, the shooting efficiency never looked strong, and the three-point shot was never reliable enough to consistently bend defenses. Injuries only made the development more fragile. From Miami to Memphis, the Clippers, Portland, and Toronto, Winslow's career slowly turned into a chain of experiments that never completely clicked. The tools were always there. The final product never really arrived. Emmanuel Mudiay entered the NBA with the kind of hype teams have a hard time ignoring. He skipped college, played overseas in China, still went 7th overall, and brought the profile of a modern, big guard-size, strength shot creation, ball handling, and the idea that he could control pace. His rookie season in Denver gave him exactly what a young guard needs if he is going to break through. More than 30 minutes a night, plenty of touches, nearly 13 points per game, and the feeling that if the pieces ever clicked, this could become a serious long-term point guard. But the area that most needed to grow never truly did: efficiency. The field goal percentage was rough from the start, and it never really got fixed. The three-point shot also failed to develop enough to make him a difficult modern guard to defend. There were seasons where the scoring totals looked decent, but the closer you looked, the easier it was to see that Mudiay's impact never rose with the opportunity. The role got smaller at every stop. Denver, New York, Utah, then slowly out of a stable NBA place altogether. With Mudiay, the issue was not a lack of chances. The issue was getting that many chances and still never turning the talent into a truly dependable game. Michael Beasley is the kind of player who always makes you feel like a bigger version of him was trapped somewhere and never fully came out. Before the NBA, he was a real phenomenon. His lone season at Kansas State looked like a video game: more than 26 points, more than 12 rebounds per game, in the sense that this was a forward built to score at will. When he went 2nd overall in 2008, the expectation barely needed explanation. A 6'9" scorer with that kind of natural touch was supposed to become a long-term problem for the league. What Beasley gave the NBA was flashes, not a trajectory. He had a season above 19 points per game. He had stretches where he looked automatic, but it never fully connected into a stable rise. The rebounding never jumped the way people expected from that kind of frame. The playmaking never opened a new layer. The two-way impact did not grow over time either. Miami, Minnesota, Phoenix, New York, Milwaukee, the Lakers. The teams changed, the role changed, but the question stayed the same. How did a scorer this naturally gifted never become a real star? Maybe because he always had the talent but never found the steady evolution to match it. Greg Monroe was not the kind of player who entered the NBA without a real foundation. In fact, he came in with a skill set that used to carry real value. He was the 7th overall pick, a Georgetown big man with polished post play, strong passing for his position, and early years in Detroit that looked solid on paper. He had seasons above 15 points per game, steady rebounding, a career field goal percentage above 50%, and from the outside that looked like the profile of a center you could build with for a long time. But Monroe became one of the clearest examples of a player who did not necessarily get worse but got left behind by the era. As the NBA became obsessed with spacing switching and big men who could stretch the floor, Monroe's game stayed almost exactly where it had always been, near the rim in the paint, built around traditional interior play. He never developed the outside shot needed to save his fit. The defense was not dominant enough to make up for it either. So the role got smaller, the teams kept changing, and a big man who once looked like he would have a long-term place slowly became harder and harder to plug into a modern NBA lineup. That is the coldest part of his story. He did not disappear because he ran out of skill. He disappeared because the league changed shape before he did. Dion Waiters always had one quality that made people want to believe a bigger scorer was coming: endless confidence. From the start, after going 4th overall in 2012, he showed real self-creation ability, double-digit scoring almost immediately, and the kind of swagger many young guards do not have. There were moments when Waiters looked like the type of player who only needed a little more efficiency and a little more discipline to jump into a much bigger offensive tier. But his career always felt more like a trail of unfinished sentences than a clear climb. He could score, but the efficiency never became clean enough to make that scoring scale up. The passing never developed into a second layer. The rebounding did not add much extra value either. Cleveland, Oklahoma City, Miami, the Lakers. Every stop had stretches where it felt like he might finally settle into a larger role, and every stop ended with the same conclusion: Waiters had real talent but never evolved enough to turn those bursts into a truly major NBA identity. Tobias Harris, he has the right size for a forward, steady scoring, respectable shooting, and across many seasons he kept producing enough for teams to view him as useful. On the surface it looks like a very solid career, but if you look at it through the lens of expectation, the story changes. Harris never grew into a primary scorer. He never became a truly elite shooter. He never turned into a two-way force strong enough to change a team's level. The playmaking stayed limited. The defensive impact never really rose. What makes this the right chapter to close with is that it reminds people failure in the NBA is not always loud. Sometimes it is just years of being good without ever becoming big enough to match what people once believed you could become. That is the most uncomfortable part about players like these. They do not completely fail. They just never become the next version of themselves. And in the NBA, standing still is sometimes all it takes to lose everything that once looked possible.